Hey everyone! Today we're going to talk about what this whole puberty thing is all about. Getting the body ready to make a baby. The body needs to go through puberty in order to reproduce. We will learn how that happens through pregnancy and the menstrual cycle. Last class we left off talking about body autonomy and consent. Let's do a little warm-up. What does body autonomy and consent mean to you? You may have said a few different things, but one way to define body autonomy is the principle that you are in control of your own body. That means that you have the right to tell someone you don't want to be touched, and you can give any reason why or why not. The same is true for other people. You need their permission to touch them. We call this permission consent. We talked about the consent is especially important for sexual parts of the body, the bathing suit area, or the breasts, butt, and genitals. It is never right or fair for someone to touch you in those parts of the body without your permission or consent. Most of the time, sexual touch is a good thing, because both partners have given consent to the other to touch their body. For now, let's define some terms around sexual touch. First, let's define what I mean by sexual touch. It means touching for the purpose of giving and receiving pleasure. It could be kisses, touching the breasts, butt, or genitals, or sexual intercourse, among other things. Sexual touch may lead to sexual arousal. Sexual arousal is how the body responds to sexual touch or sexual thoughts. Sexual arousal can feel warm or tingly. It might feel awkward or confusing at first, but sexual arousal is normal and healthy to experience. Sexual intercourse is a kind of sexual touch involving the genitals. Most of the time when people talk about sex, this is what they mean. Sexual intercourse can be vaginal, where the penis is inserted into the vagina, oral, where there's contact between the genitals and the mouth, or anal, which is sexual intercourse involving the anus. Two men, two women, or a man and a woman can have sexual intercourse. The goal of puberty is to prepare the body for sex, because vaginal intercourse can lead to pregnancy. Remember, just because the body gets ready for sex during puberty doesn't mean that you are emotionally ready for sex yet. We'll talk more about that next class, but this class we're going to focus on pregnancy. Before we do, let's define a couple more touch terms. The next one is masturbation. Masturbation is when a person touches his or her genitals for comfort or pleasure. There is nothing wrong with choosing to masturbate, or choosing not to. It can't hurt your body. It's important to know that masturbation is something that people do in private. Our next term is orgasm. An orgasm is a strong, pleasurable sensation that can happen during masturbation or sexual touch to both male and female bodies. It may happen sometimes, but not others. Having or not having an orgasm during sex or sexual touch is perfectly normal. So, how do two people have a baby? Well, there are a few different ways. Parents can adopt a baby, or they can do something called in vitro fertilization, where the sperm and egg are joined outside the body and then implanted in the woman's uterus. It could also be implanted in a different woman, which is called having a surrogate. Natural pregnancies start with vaginal sexual intercourse, when the penis is inserted in the vagina. For this to happen, the penis needs to be erect, also known as having an erection. This is when the penis fills with blood and becomes stiff. Once it is stimulated, it can release semen into the vagina, in what is called an ejaculation. Remember, semen contains sperm and fluid. Erections start to happen more frequently around puberty. Because the body is getting used to making them, erections can happen at seemingly random times. It is natural to feel nervous this will happen at the wrong time, but an erection will go away and mostly no one else notices. Erections will happen less often as you get older, generally happening only when you want them to, during sexual arousal. Erections also happen naturally to everyone during sleep. Not every erection ends in ejaculation, or sperm leaving the body. However, sometimes the first ejaculation during puberty happens during sleep, in what sometimes gets called a wet dream. It's natural to be nervous about this, but it's not something you can really control. It might be helpful to know that usually the first ejaculations don't make a lot of fluid, maybe just a teaspoon or two, or a couple milliliters. Usually, all you need to do is change your pajamas in the morning, but you might want to also change your sheets too. It is up to you if you share why or why not. Let's take a look at what happens once sperm enters the female body. Millions of sperm start in the vagina, but only one will eventually make it to the egg. Sperm have a head, which stores the DNA or instructions for making a baby, and a tail for swimming. Sperm first swim through the vagina and up through the cervix, the entrance to the uterus. They then swim through the uterus to the fallopian tube, where they will meet the egg. Usually, only one ovary will release an egg each cycle. Of course, the sperm have no idea which way to go, so half of them will end up swimming in the wrong tube. Eventually, one of the sperm will reach the egg and burrow its way in. Now the two sets of DNA or instructions can come together, one from the mom and one from the dad. This one cell, now called a zygote, will migrate to the uterus. On the way, one cell divides into 2, then 4, and so on, eventually becoming the millions and millions of cells that make up our body. In the uterus, the developing baby, now called an embryo, burrows deep into the bloody lining of the wall of the uterus, which protects and nourishes it. You might wonder how the egg knows when to come out of the ovary to fuse with the sperm. The answer is, it doesn't. Instead, usually about once a month, the ovary releases an egg just in case. The uterus also builds up a lining just in case it needs to nourish a developing embryo. If there is no pregnancy, the egg disintegrates, and the lining of the uterus is shed. Some of the lining leaves the body through the vagina. Next month, it starts all over again. We call this cycle the menstrual cycle. The part where the bloody lining leaves the body is called a period. Female bodies start periods during puberty. It is natural to be nervous about this, especially for the first time. It may be helpful to know that usually the blood comes out over several days, so usually there's not a lot at once, maybe just a teaspoon or 2 or a couple milliliters. There are a lot of period products to make sure that the blood doesn't get on clothes. 2 common ones are called pads and tampons. Many times when people know their period is coming, they carry them around, and trusted adults like teachers, nurses, or friends are usually happy to share if you need one. I'll put a link in the class description with more information on how to use them, but for now know that pads go in the underwear and tampons go in the vagina. Just like with erections in boys, the body needs to get used to making periods at first. This means that the first few may be irregular. They may skip months at times, or they may happen more frequently. After a bit, they'll become more regular, on average once every 4 weeks or 28 days, and lasting for a few days. But every woman is different. It is perfectly normal to have longer periods or shorter periods. A normal period means normal for your own body. Still, it is also normal to skip periods at different times throughout life. Sometimes women feel menstrual cramps, which is like a stomach cramp but in your uterus. Usually taking medication like ibuprofen or using a hot compress helps. You may also have heard about something called PMS, or premenstrual syndrome. Basically, some women feel different emotions or physical symptoms at different times during their cycle. Every girl is different and you know your body best. And again, you will figure out what is normal for you. Sometimes people use PMS to downplay what women feel. Like if a woman is mad, they say, "Oh, she just has PMS," which isn't really a fair thing to say. The truth is, just like all teens and adults, women are allowed to feel emotions at any time, and it's wrong to just dismiss them. Periods are a normal and healthy part of puberty and life. Remember, the blood that comes out isn't dirty. After all, it's there to support a developing baby. The most important takeaway from understanding the menstrual cycle is that ovulation and periods happen at opposite times. That is, if we start the cycle at the period, the egg is released from the ovary halfway through, or about 2 weeks later. Ovulation is when a pregnancy can happen. If the egg is fertilized by sperm, the embryo migrates to the uterus, also known as the womb, where it burrows into the lining. This is again that lining that would otherwise be shed during the period. From there, the baby develops for 9 months until it is ready to be born. A lot of people want to know how twins can happen. There are 2 main ways that someone can have twins. First, sometimes both ovaries will release an egg at the same time. Each egg can then be fertilized by a different sperm, and both can go on to develop into babies. This is called fraternal twins. Second, sometimes a fertilized egg will split in 2, making 2 identical embryos. This is called identical twins. The human body's ability to make a baby is truly amazing. If you want to see what a baby looks like when it is developing, head over to the Pregnancy and Period section of the All About You app. You can also see what is going on in the body during the menstrual cycle.